Hey art nerds! So last time we talked about lighting, shadow, and contrast using a very basic skull structure, and this is done with alcohol markers. Today we're gonna step it up a notch. We're gonna do some very basic facial forms using the same techniques, but this time accounting for shading for the eyes, the nose, the mouth, etc. So today we're going to be using BG11 Moon White, BG15 Aqua, and BG07. Now, if you are an art nerd, you're in luck because you have access to this line art as part of your Patreon goodies. And if you're missing access to this and want to color along, just shoot me a message on Patreon. I'll send it to you. You also have access to the line art for this as well. So you can print this out using any toner printer. You can head on down to Office Max. You can use the copier at your office, print this out onto just regular cardstock, and you're ready to color along. And I'll give you guys a second to go do that. So this tutorial might look intimidating. I promise though, it's fairly simple, fairly straightforward. I'm gonna walk you guys through it. The only additional material you're absolutely going to need is the colorless blender. Now, if you're not an art nerd and you want access to this line art, you can pay for it on Gumroad, or you can put that money towards joining my Patreon at patreon.com/natosoup and getting an entire month's worth of early access videos, awesome line arts, and access to my making comics and my making comics and zine class materials. I'll let you guys do the math and you guys can find the links down below. So we're gonna go ahead and dive into this tutorial with this front facing view. And for those of you who are curious, this is actually based on my character Kara's face, so it's younger, more childlike proportions, but you can use this basic skull, and using one of my other really awesome tutorials, you can learn how to use constructive anatomy to construct your own character faces in a turnaround. This is a really great tool for designing characters and doing character turnarounds, so I think it's well worth the $2 a month. But we're gonna go ahead and dive in to that front-facing view. In my last tutorial, my light source came from the top left. I'm going to stay consistent so that you guys, while you're coloring along, can use the resource we generated in that last tutorial. You can use that as a reference off to the side. So we're going to be doing our light coming from, sorry, I should have said top right, coming from the top right from this one as well. And for those of you who are kind of still struggling with light sources, I recommend just doing a little arrow to help remind you where the light source is coming from. So we are going to start with BG11. And I'm going to render everything volumetrically. So we could do an entire face fill with this, but what I'm going to start with is we're going to do kind of a base color, leaving the white of the paper as our highlight. And our little bald-headed child here is going to look a lot like Aang from Avatar. And I'm just doing a very basic and quick fill. Now, if this color is a little bit too dark for you, you can push it back using your colorless blender. And you can use this to push your color to the back of the paper, anywhere you want to add a little bit of a highlight. So we might want to add highlight here to the eyes, to the edges of the ears, to the top of the nose, and maybe to the top of the mouth. We might also want to add a little bit of highlight along the cheeks where maybe the sun has kissed the cheeks. So once that's had a chance to dry, we're going to start blocking in major areas of shadow. Now, for those of you who read superhero comics, you're going to be familiar with the concept of a domino mask. And that's just the small mask that kind of goes around the eyes, like what Robin wears. And it goes around like a figure 8 shape. So I'll doodle one really quickly for you guys up here. Alright, so that would be a domino mask. So that is one of the areas of shading on the face. The eyes are always kind of recessed into the skull, so it's going to be an area that's always a little bit darker. And then, as we talked about in the last lighting and contrast tutorial with alcohol markers, the skull has a sort of spherical shape to it. So I'm following the rounded shape of the skull underneath the nose. Then, depending on what kind of nose the person has, and this is Kara, so she has a little pug nose. Her nose is kind of recessed underneath the lip, maybe the lip as well if they have kind of full lips. We're going to do this ear a little bit further back, the interior of this ear, and then following the jaw here. So that's kind of the basics of that face. Then your eyes are spherical. So think of this like we're coloring in a Greek statue or a Roman statue, where we're molding, we're sculpting the face as we go along. Push that back a little bit. So that is the very basic shading on the face. We're going to go in next with BG15. We're going to render this out a little bit more. So I like to fill in the area around the eyes. And I'm going to use the previous color to blend out. And I'm using a non-skin tone, A, because it's going to be easier for you guys to see what I'm doing. You're not going to be distracted too much thinking about skin tones, I hope. And B, it's just going to stand out a little bit more. So I do the eyebrows, then I do kind of the contour of the face, and for those of you who like to play with makeup, we're going to do that sort of 3 shape where we go in a little bit on the cheeks. And then for the eyes, usually when I do the eyes, I actually shade the top halves of the eyes and then I add highlight later, but today we're thinking about them as spheres. This is our sphere theory. The inside of the ear, the inside of this ear as well. And the way I like to think about shading is every new layer I try to shade less than the prior layer. Underneath the nose, the top of the nose, underneath the mouth. Now we're going to go back in with our prior color. We're going to just kind of soften all of this out. And what's neat about the blended triads that I recommend you guys use is you can get a lot of tone out of the 3 markers, because you can do a lot of blending. You can push the colors back a lot, and you can layer each color several times to really build up the colors that you want to use. So, as we talked about in my other lighting and contrast videos, you have harsh lighting or harsh shadow where a light source is hitting an area and the shadow is obstructed from the light by another object. And then you have softer blended shadows as the forms just kind of turn away from the light source. Now, as we blend out using our last color, don't use the colorless blender, use the next lightest color. As we blend out using the next lightest color, you're putting down more layers of color. So you're actually not only pushing the color to the back, you're softening the transition by building up even more shadow. So this may take some getting used to for some people because it may put too much ink down on the paper for them. Okay, we're gonna use the same color and just kind of looks like the Statue of Liberty, like a very young version of the Statue of Liberty, huh? Because we're using blue greens, like the verdigris of the copper. So we've got our third layer there. I'm gonna blend that out as well. And my marker tutorials are not for people who are trying to spare their markers. My Copic tutorials will use up your markers fast. And then finally, we're gonna go in with BG07. We've already built up a lot of shading and a lot of contrast, so we don't need that much. We're gonna go in and do the ear where it is blocked from light, the interior of the ear. You can do the underside of the nose. Be careful, you don't want it to look like a little Hitler mustache. It's not what we're about here. The upper eyelids, underneath the eyebrows. And then of course if you have like hair falling over the face, like we're going to talk about in the next lighting and contrast tutorial, that's also going to create some shading, cast some shadow. Alright, so then we're going to go back with our BG15 and we're just going to blend that out. Blend those transitions out anywhere where you don't want it to look like a harsh cast shadow. So our little baby Statue of Liberty face is really kind of coming to shape, coming to fruition. And just working back and forth between your colors. You can blend and shade and push things and pull things until it looks the way you want it to look. So it's definitely one of those, you need to practice it, do it over and over again. You'll get better as time progresses kinds of things. Now, if you want, you can go darker with your little domino mask shape. You can leave it lighter. If you go darker, it's going to give the impression of heavy set eyes. If you go lighter, it's going to be a younger, kind of smoother face. So that is our front view. It certainly took much longer than the front view without any features at all. So next we are going to do our 3/4 view. All right, so we are going to use the same light source. When we're practicing, consistency is key, but I also recommend doing one view and changing your light source. That's great practice too. And if you guys are interested in that, let me know and I will do a tutorial on that as well. I need to practice myself. So we're going to go in with BG11. We're going to establish our light source. Maybe we want to leave rim lighting, which I talked about in the other tutorial video, but rim lighting is basically when you leave a rim of lighting uncolored, and I'm going to fill in the rest of the area. Okay, so we've got the base layer filled in. I'm going to go ahead and do a second layer with BG11, and I clandestinely filled my marker, so it should be less gross and streaky. Now you guys might notice I've left some of the same marks on the face as I did for the other video, the other contrast video. So we're doing the domino mask again, and this time it's actually a little bit more visible, so I'm glad for that. And this is the area hit with light the most, so we're gonna kind of work our way around the contours of the face. And doing these sort of exercises is really good practice, especially for this ma'am here, because, you know, I am a comic artist and I do watercolor comics, so practicing lighting and contrast makes me more confident in doing dramatic lighting and contrast when I'm painting. Then I'm going to go in with our colorless blender and push color back here and there. Maybe like the top of her nose and her upper lip, those sort of places. Maybe I'll go in again on the domino mask and just kind of reestablish those colors. This time I'm going to leave the eyes a little bit more blank. And as long as you're coloring wet over wet, it's going to be more subtly blended. If you want a stronger contrast, let it dry and then blend it out if you need it blended. Alright, so next we're grabbing BG15. again, I'm filling in her eyelids. We're gonna do her eyes so that they appear spherical. We're gonna color in this slice here, as well as most of the ear, leaving a bit of rim lighting. We're gonna do the 3 blush technique. And even those of you who don't wear makeup, that's a good technique to keep in mind. Watching contouring videos will teach you a lot about how where light hits the face affects how the face is contoured. And they do kind of a trompe l'oeil, fool the eye effect by putting lighter or darker makeup in those areas to make you think it's either receding or coming towards you. So even if you're not a makeup person yourself, those kind of videos can be really cool. And then we're going to blend that out using Moon White. And as you go, you may decide you want to work some areas more, blend them out a little bit better, add more contrast in those areas. What's beautiful about markers and about watercolor is you're really invited to do a lot of pushing and pulling, and you can really modify what you do till it looks right to you. Doing another layer with BG15. Each layer covers less than the layer before. And then finally BG07. And blend it out again with BG15. Okay, I think that is our first 3/4 view finished. Next, we're going to move over to the side profile. For our side profile, we're still dealing with the same light source. We're going to start again with BG15. For this one, I'm going to leave a lot of rim lighting. Oh, that's the wrong one. No, 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 no. It's okay. BG11. So I am leaving lots of rim lighting there. The domino mask area is going to get colored. The top of her nose will have rim lighting. And then I'm just going to fill in the rest of this. And while this dries, I'm going to go in with our colorless blender and just do a little bit of rough pushing. Then we're going to go back in with BG11 and we're going to start modeling our forms. So I'm going to color the slice in all the way. And if there's ever something I mention in this video that you don't know what I'm talking about, I do recommend checking out the prior video in this series. And then if you still don't know what I'm talking about, send me a message, leave a comment. And then I'm going to do the domino mask around the eyes, the 3 on the cheeks. Now this is actually being obscured by the light. So depending on how you want to model the forms, you could just fill this whole area in with dark. Again, as I mentioned in the prior video, it's all about storytelling. Then I do the lips. Then we're going to go in with BG15. Fill in the whole slice. As well as this side of the jaw because it turns away from the light source. The eyebrow and the eye socket, and then the bottom part of the eye, the underside of the nose, and the bottom lip. Then I'm going to go back in with BG11. I'm just going to soften and push and darken some of those areas. So we talked about massaging the color until it's what you want it to be. Maybe even a little highlight on the ear for storytelling, really. Then we're going to go back in with BG15. I'm going to color in the inside of her ear, as well as the rest of the slice. By darkening this up, it's going to make the lighter part feel like it's coming towards you. So we're creating depth. And then finally, BG07. Fill in the slice and then the bottom part of the skull, and then blend that back using BG15. Alright, that is 3 views done. Now we're going to move on to 3/4 facing away from the viewer. So for our 3/4 facing away from, I guess it would be 1/4? Anyway, same light source. We're going to start with BG11. I'm going to do full rim lighting and fill in the nose just a little bit and then fill that in. Now where it's closest to the light source, you might want it to have a strong contrast. Where it's further from the light source, you might want to blend it and have it be a little bit softer. So we use the colorless blender. Then I'm using BG11 again. We're going to color in the back of the skull. And depending on the lighting situation and how dramatic you want your piece to be, is going to depend on how contrasty you get and how dark your colors get. So remember, I'm doing this kind of for demonstration purposes. You don't have to do it the same way I do it. And then we're going to try and do the little domino mask here. And then follow the contours of the face, leaving it lighter while filling all this in. And try to leave a little bit of the ear lighter, like it was light kissed as well. Then we're going to go in with BG15. Color in the back of the head, color in the slice. With the slice, if you want, you can start leaving it lighter. It doesn't have to be uniform in color because it's moving towards another point in space. So if it serves your illustration to make it lighter, make it lighter. We're gonna do a little bit of the eye socket there. We're gonna follow the plane of the face down. We're gonna do the little 3 thing. And and then we're going to just color all of this in, just like we did in the last tutorial. And at the end of the video, I will compare the two so you guys can kind of see how the two different heads or the two different systems compare. Now I'm blending back out with Moon White, just kind of softening the transition. Again, you don't have to. How stark you wish to leave it is gonna, you know, be dependent upon your storytelling and what kind of look you're going for. I'm gonna go in, try to get another layer of B15 in there. Cast some shadows from the ear. We'll fill in the underside of the head. And then we'll move on to BG07. And then put a small circle at the back of the head. And then just fill all these undersides in. Do a circle here where the ear would be casting shadow. Maybe even fill this part in. Again, it's kind of dependent on y'all. And then just follow the jawline and then blend that back with BG15. Just soften it a little bit. Again, if you let it dry, you'll be able to get another layer on it. So I'm going to give this a chance to dry and then do another layer under the jaw. Okay, the alcohol is a little bit cool, a little bit damp. That's how you know it's still damp, when it's still cool. But we're going to go ahead. We're going to do another layer on it. And we'll call it done for now and move on to our next view. Our next view is 3/4 or 1/4 facing away from our light source. So I designate our light source. We're going to begin with BG11, and we're going to use a very similar technique as we did for the back of the head here. So we're going to designate nice strong rim lighting and then fill in the rest. Okay, now that it's filled in, we're gonna soften the contrast by using the colorless blender as we move away from the light source, leaving the contrast starker as we're closer to the light source. And then we're going to fill it in again. Now remember, the skull is basically spherical. So if we're doing something that's gonna be a little bit higher drama, we might wanna color in more of her face. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to leave a little bit of rim lighting on the side. But I'm going to color in the majority of her face. Let's go for some drama here. 7-inch Kara has drama, but it doesn't always have a lot of lighting drama. So let's do some fun lighting drama. We want to do another layer, we would let it dry. I'm going to move on to BG15. Wait, I want to do the domino mask first. So let's try doing the domino mask. If we don't get any results, I'll switch over to Moon White. So when we're facing away from the light, you're going to want to color most of it in shadow. You might leave some of the higher points, like the top of the nose or like the tops of the apples of the cheek. You might want to leave that lit. You can also go back with your colorless blender and push that back if you wish. So we'll do that here. And it's really easier when we're doing just 3 colors. We're not worrying about blush, we're not worrying about freckles, we're not worrying about additional shadows. We're just really worrying about these 3 colors here, which is why it's good to practice with that. So for here, I'm going to actually start doing our little domino mask with BG15, and we're going to blend it out a little bit, and I'm leaving a little bit of the white, but not as stark as it would have been. So there is our domino mask. Then I'm going to shade the underside, and you may want to account for cast shadows or core shadows too. So if the light were hitting the back of her head, her head would be blocking almost all the light from hitting her face, which would have a really dramatic lighting effect. It would start to look kind of ominous. Her ears would also block most of the light. And maybe even we get some of the curve of the sphere. And then we're going to blend that back with BG11. And if you want to leave your shadows harsh, you can. I like doing a mixture, harsh shadows, soft shadows. I'm going to do that here in the eyes as well. Also go back in with some colorless blender and push that back as well. And then go in with BG15 and continue developing those colors. So we're going to do the tops of the eyelids like we normally do. Actually, the domino mask, I would think, would be a little bit more pronounced. So I'm going to go back in, just kind of establish it more. We've already decided we're going to go into the creepy zone, the Twilight Spooky Door zone. So we're still doing the kind of the 3 makeup thing, except not on this cheek because it's getting kind of hit by the light coming from the other side. Again, you can use lighting as storytelling. You can, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. We're aiming for evocative rather than accurate. Then I'll go in with BG07 and we'll do eyelids. This could be, if you want to get really dark, this could be a good time to maybe introduce another even darker BG color, like Flagstone Blue could be a good one. The insides of the ears, maybe the area where the ears would block the light. Blend that back again with BG15. We're still adding ink to the paper too, so it's going to make the colors a little bit darker. You can also help imply lighting by doing darker inking on this side. You might decide you want to re-ink a little bit after you've applied your color. That's fine. There's no cheating in art unless you're stealing from somebody. So we'll call this done for now. Okay, so for our remaining 3 heads, they are not that different from what we did in the other tutorial. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to do most of it in time-lapse and maybe come back to you guys with my thoughts. I'm going to keep the light sources the same. I just don't want this video to run into being like an hour long. If you ever want me to redo a tutorial and explain something in more depth, just let me know in the comments below. I'm happy to do that. Okay, so we've got the base colors on all these head forms. I'm gonna pull our original modeled shapes just to compare. These in particular are really similar because once you're no longer dealing with like the head or really the ears so much, it's pretty much the same thing. Now once we add hair, that's definitely going to change things, but we're still kind of keeping things simple, keeping things approachable. So just like we did in our last tutorial, we're going to add some white accents just to help add that contrast, pop things out a bit. Again, I'm using the white pigment marker, mostly just in the eyes because I left really good highlights at the top of the head and maybe on the lips. Basically anywhere you want to kind of draw attention to, or you want to make them seem to be closer to the viewer because lighter things usually appear closer. This is also a great way if you colored an area a little bit too dark. This is a great way to just lighten it up just a little bit. And when I was inking these, this was actually the second time I'd inked these because I really botched the first. And I did make some mistakes on them. But when you're coloring, when you're using Copic markers, when you're using watercolor, you can play with how the eye perceives form and line art. So some things are worth fixing, some things are not. I felt like this was not necessarily worth fixing because I thought the flaws in this were just not big enough to stop me from sharing this video, and I also just didn't want to do it a third time. L-A-Z-Y, ain't got no alibi. So it's going to be harder to get darker than what BG07 is right now unless we switch to another color. This head has had a long time to dry, so I can get kind of another tone in there. It also gives you a chance to get sharper delineations of color, like I've mentioned a few times in this video. If you do wet into wet, it's going to blend out a little bit more and you're not going to get as much of a transition. If you give it a chance to dry and then go back into the area though, it's kind of going to give you almost like a fresh surface. So I'm just kind of going back in, reestablishing just a little bit more contrast. We can also do that by adding spot blacks, but I'm going to kind of finish up adding our whites. Now I highly recommend if you want to do marker work and you want to be able to add white highlights back in, kind of like I'm doing here, you will invest in a white Winsor Newton, sorry, brain is trying to die on me, white Winsor Newton pigment marker. It's going to allow you to build up slightly opaque layers of white as well as a white pit pen. You can also use a white Signo marker for smaller highlights, more isolated highlights. I really like using this to add highlights to hair, maybe to the lips, to the tip of the nose, to the eyes in particular. And then finally, as I mentioned in my last video, you can go in and do spot black, where you just fill the whole area with a black shadow. That's going to up the contrast. You can also go in and increase the line weight on some of them. I'm not going to do that today, but I think you guys should check out some of my inking videos if you're interested in that. And you can always bump up your line art after you finish the piece too. It doesn't have to be done at the beginning. It can be done at the end as well. All right, so I think that about covers it. I have more lighting and contrast drawing people tutorials coming up in the near future. We're going to do one with Kara, who has a lighter skin tone, and later we're going to do one with Naomi, who has a darker skin tone. So please stick around for those. I hope this video was helpful, useful, and informative for you guys. I hope it was inspiring. I hope it answered some of your questions. If you have any further questions after watching both of these videos, let me know in the comments below. I'm happy to help, and your suggestions and your questions inspire me to make future videos. So don't worry, about asking a dumb question. I do think there are dumb questions, but your question is probably not one of them. So I hope I will see you guys again really soon. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you like what I do and you'd like to take a class, make sure you sign up for my mailing list. I have a class mailing list where I send out information about upcoming classes, and you can find a link to that in the description below. If you'd like to gain access to both of these scans as well as the line arts and loads more really awesome goodies, you should join my Patreon, join the art nerd community, and help support this channel over at patreon.com/natosoup. If you're looking for more alcohol marker tutorials and resources, check out my alcohol marker playlist here on this channel. I'll link it in the cards, as well as my alcohol marker hub page over at natosoup.blogspot.com. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I will see you guys again in the near future. Bye guys!